Hello and welcome to Brims documentation. With this series, I'm going to be covering Brims and how you can contribute, basically how things are functioning thus far, what I plan on editing, and what needs work. And if you're willing to contribute, basically watch this. It'd be greatly appreciative. If you're wondering how this application works from a needing to edit it for your own purposes level, this might be useful as well. So first of all, let's talk about what a LIMS application is. LIMS usually stands for Laboratory Information Management System. This is dropping the L part of that. We're not importing, part of that process tends to be importing actual laboratory data, something that was calculated out of a machine, something along those lines. Now, Brims could be edited to do that, but primarily it's just concerned with specimen, where it came from, and where it's stored. And ultimately, the end goal is to have something that looks like, so it'd be in not draw schedule storage setup. Something that looks like this. So here you've got a box essentially where you're storing specimen that are aliquots that are derived from specimen. Aliquots. So let's say you have a blood draw of 20 milliliters. If you then do analysis on 1 millimeter samples out of that, that's the aliquoted portion, or you do things to make aliquots out of the baseline specimen that you're drawing. But anyway, this is the end goal, to have a box that is storing something someplace. Yes. And these panels, I think I'm going to remove the action items panel, should handle all the management of that, specifically where boxes are shipped, where they're coming from, patients, what system the patients were originally created in, as for scheduling and for other information related there, what we're drawing, where it's stored, and then an overview, of course, of the specimen and aliquot associated. In the code base, giving a quick rough overview of where everything is and everything stored. I'll actually go from the top directory. Ignore the seatbelt dev. The original name of this project was seatbelt. In fact, I think on the GitHub page you'll see seatbelt injector, and effectively that's to inject patients from a remote system into this. That was just the dummy holder name that was randomly chosen until we came up with Brims. But looking in the back end app, this is where all the Django code is. Brims contains all of the Django settings. So if you edit I believe it is the Django secret key and your database settings, I'm not going to open it because they're actually set in here, even though it's a dummy environment. I'm paranoid. Go figure. There's also in views just the CSRF token. This is the portion that's not working. I think I've mentioned that in previous videos, but this is the one downfall of the grad application currently. I'm going to work on it as soon as I'm done with this application as a whole, see if I can figure out a solution to make this work. But there's a GitHub issue that might be closed, but if you do a general search inside, I think it's Django Graphene for CSFR or general authentication permissions, it should come up in there. Inside URLs, you're going to see, and the reason I brought that up is because you'll see that pop up as a path here. That's the exposed location to pull CSRF tokens for security, but again, it's not fully working, which is why I also have the CSRF exempt path for the GraphQL path. To get this thing working, you are going to need that /GraphQL path to make the GraphQL calls from the front end. I also have the admin panel to just add in models very quickly for testing and things like that. When developing things, it just speeds development along. And then debug toolbar, you can add that if you like. And then for the actual models and everything else, that's in the LIMS folder. Schema is at the top level, and this is where all the actual GraphQL and data munging calls are happening in all of their glory. Inside what I've done inside the models portion is, if you look at init.py, I'm just importing from each of the individual submodules. The user is not really used, it's just a custom user. If you look at this web page from shout out to W.S. Vincent, it was a nice little tutorial on why a custom user is important. Mostly because if you want to do anything different in the future, it becomes very difficult if you've already done user without having this nice little abstract model alongside. Look at that web page for more information along there. But here's all the split out models from the back end that are then imported and reflected in the schema, for example, patient. And that is the back end basically covered as far as its structure. Inside the front end, this is inside the source directory, app.js. Gonna edit it. has all of the baseline code. There's a CSRF token code, of course, that isn't working still, that needs to be tweaked. So just keep that in mind. I use React Router, or React Router DOM in particular, to create a bunch of routes in the application, which look like this. Switch route path. Each of these views is an active view, and that's actually working, and you can see the component that it's pointing to is a component that's imported from the layout section. So essentially this pushes stuff up, and we'll go into the components. Inside the layout section, I have it broken down by, I have some example data, some things that aren't completely functional yet, some things that are used across a lot of other locations, and then the stuff that's actually working or planning to be worked on in the near future, which is in its own individual section. The most complicated one, which we'll be covering in the next video, is specimen. You can see it's just got a ton of stuff happening there. Inside an individual, let's see if I've got one with info. Hold on, specimen. We'll use landing page because I think that is an active one. The import calls for the GraphQL calls, in most instances, not in every single instance across the board, but most of them, they're going to be pulling the GraphQL calls from the data section, which looks like this, which is just broken down to, I split it out between query and mutation. So we'll use specimen as the example again. So you got specimen query data, which has all your specimen calls, or specimen GraphQL calls, and then quit, and then schedule query, which has all of the mutation, specimen spectrum, specimen mutation. There you go. You can see these are all the mutations that are then added in. And if you want to look at examples of GraphQL tag queries and or mutations, this is a good place to look. And that is basically how the code is organized overall. In videos moving forward, I'm going to be covering essentially what is happening in each of these sections and doing kind of not a 10,000, but a little bit more detailed view of what is happening in each portion of the code, starting with specimen panel, the specimen landing page, and the specimen info panel, as well as mistakes I've made along the way and how you can do better. Thanks for listening.